welcome everyone. This is Kristina Mand-Lakhiani, co-founder of Mindvalley. Welcome again. I'm starting to become a more common guest here on our Mindvalley platform. So welcome to my honest conversations. Today I have a very exciting guest, and my today's guest is Joel Primus. Hi, Joel.
Hi, thanks for having me.
I believe you're in US right now, right?
Canada.
Oh, Canada, sorry. Yes, anyway, you're across the ocean from me.
I'm across the ocean, just a little bit north of.
Yes, it's actually cool because you're as far north probably as I am. So Joel is a former elite runner and currently an entrepreneur, and I really love the name of your company, Naked Underwear. It made me feel a little more excited about our conversation. I do hope you have a streak of naughtiness in you calling your company this way.
Rebellion from my parents, right?
Yes. Joel also is an author of a book, Getting Naked, again, naked, and also a filmmaker, as I understand. Your film is about raising conscious children, right?
Global citizens, as we called it.
Global
Yeah, but I guess that works just as well.
So I know you have a very interesting story of maybe I'll give a premise first. So I'm a mother, I'm a lot of other things, but I'm a mother as well. And I love to actually draw my lessons in life from my lessons in being a mother. So often I compare my relationships or my business or work with being a mother. So I understand that you have had a very significant experience as a runner, and that's something which is so alien for me. I mean, competing running, it just seems too hard. And you compare that experience to being in business. So could you give the premise, maybe your story a little bit first before we dive into the whole topic of actually business being like, I guess if we compare to running, not a sprint, but a marathon, right?
Yeah, absolutely. As is everything. And I totally love the analogy too about parenting being that mirror in which we experience everything that we do outside of our parenting roles. But yeah, thanks for having me again. This is really quite an honor. Obviously, I've been a fan of. I think the first time I ever discovered Mindvalley was Vishen's 6-minute meditation, and I think that was like 10 years ago. It might have been, and I used to listen to that every single day, and it was so sweet. So. Gosh, where do I start? Well, there's a lot to unpack here. I'm really looking forward to diving into it. But I guess the runner piece is a good place to, as any. I was, and I guess you could call me an elite runner. I had a full ride scholarship to a university. I was representing Canada internationally, and then I blew out my Achilles, and I ended up losing my scholarship and losing my place on Canada's national team. And I was forced with an identity crisis, an insecurity crisis, a what the heck do I do now? Who am I crisis? And the only answer I had at the moment was travel. And so as this, life journey unfolds before me that I have no idea is happening, I end up deciding to film this travel documentary, which didn't actually get completed there. But it took me from Mexico all the way down to Santiago. And then when I was in Peru, I just needed some underwear. And I literally my underwear had holes in it. So I went to a night market and I bought some beautiful Pima cotton underwear from a street vendor. And my mom bought me garbage underwear my whole life. Maybe all the sons on this call can attest to that. And it's like something that just happens. And then I felt this unbelievable underwear. I'm like, wow. But then I hiked up Machu Picchu and I was wearing it. And I was like, oh, it feels great, but it doesn't perform. And so the idea that landed on me was, how do I take the best of the running fabrics and the performance and marry it back to this super soft Pima cotton and make something so comfortable no matter what you did, it felt like you were wearing nothing at all. And so it's not so naughty where the name Naked came from. It was naked so comfortably you feel like you're wearing nothing at all. And so I made this pair, and I shouldn't say I made this pair, a friend's grandma sewed the first pair of underwear. And we ended up on Canada's version of Shark Tank. I'm sure yourself and many people here on the call are familiar with that. So the producers of that show said, if you actually want this episode to air, your pitch on this TV show, you have to do the pitch in your underwear. So, so I went on national TV in my underwear. I got totally annihilated on valuation, and which we can get into. And I always joke, like, that like terrible, like buzzy feeling when you want to ask somebody out and you get rejected and your face goes really red and you have butterflies in your stomach. Well, like, imagine
you're only wearing underwear at that time.
And you're only wearing that, right? So to make a long story short, I used that as fuel and determination to kind of prove people wrong, and went from that failure on national TV to raising close to $20 million, uplisting the company onto the NASDAQ, putting it in every major department store in the United States, partnered with NBA superstar Dwayne Wade, and eventually divested the company. But the crux of the story and the purpose of the book, Getting Naked, is that by the end of it, I was depressed. I was just riddled with anxiety. My marriage was on the fence as to whether it would survive. I'd barely seen my daughter in 2 years because of business travel. And so it was quite an awakening experience, not necessarily in that moment. So, yeah, that's.
Can I ask you a slightly unfair question? Because I do not know if you talk about that, so it might be from a different angle. But you just said that it was the failure in the Shark Tank, you being rejected while wearing only underwear on national TV. Sorry, I'm exaggerating, I know. But it made you want to prove that your business is actually worth the investment and actually being out there. How did it make you feel trying to prove, or doing it out of proving it? Or did you actually have that? Or maybe the question is more than what was motivating you more, that failure on TV and humiliation and you wanting to prove the opposite, or actually the fact that this underwear was some kind of a mission for you? What was the stronger motivation? Because I know we might say like, oh no, don't do things to prove something or to prove someone wrong, but we all do that from time to time. It's like we're just humans. So I want to see, how was the balance there, and how did it actually work out in real life? Because I've heard that, if you're trying to do something I have that experience as well. There is this discontent somewhere. It doesn't make you, like, even if you succeed, it doesn't make you feel at peace with your success.
I don't know whose quote this is, but I think it's a great one. And it says, we always will try and essentially slay the monsters in the outer world until we've slayed them inside of us. And so we'll keep trying to do things externally until we've actually dealt with it internally. And that comes back to this idea of insecurity that I mentioned. And there's sort of duality in us that you just described, right? That we're always a little bit of both until we've freed ourselves from ourselves. And in the beginning, insecurity, it comes up as in good ways, and then it ends up, if it prolongs in our life, manifesting in bad ways. So in the beginning, I had major self-worth issues. I believed that my only worth was through accomplishment. And that was sort of ingrained in me as I was growing up, and I was a successful runner. And so I had this constant feedback loop of win a race, get praise, mom and dad love me, like all that stuff. And they would have loved me regardless, but you don't really know what's happening until it's taken away. And all of a sudden, when you're without that thing, in this case, it was the running, you feel that void of worth and self-worth, and you're just desperate to fill it with something to prove that I exist, that I am worthy enough. And, a great example of that is Michael Jordan, talking a lot about in the greatest basketball player of all time, one of the greatest athletes of all time, was largely fueled by an insecurity of, wanting to prove that he's better than his brother, wanting to win the love of his father. And in the beginning of a lot of our lives, as we set out on our journeys, to explore who we are and who we can be in this world, that insecurity actually fuels some of that journey, right? This need to say, hey, how can I win a mate? How can I stake my claim in the ground? How do I match up against these other people? And so in that sense, it can propel us to incredible heights. But if it goes unchecked long into our life, it ends up manifesting in what I deem to be troublesome behavior. I think it manifests in only valuing money, in manifests in thinking that all the answers are in external gratification. And that's obviously not the case, which is why in my own journey, despite the success, I ended up depressed and anxious because my motivations were leaned more towards trying to prove people wrong and fill that void in my life than the wonderful curiosity of just seeing what I could do and just trying to bring something into the world, which was the underwear, and seeing what I could do there. So in the beginning, it was very poorly fueled by insecurity, even after that moment. And I paid for that. I paid that price because I had to unwind that later in my life when I realized that it had put me in a position where everything I really valued, my wife, my children, my health, I was in hospital at the end of it, was in jeopardy. That was the cost of achieving the thing. And that doesn't mean that we can't have both. It just means we have to approach it differently.
So if we go back to that high moment of your business success and your life failure, what happened to you that you changed actually, or what was the trigger, and what did you change?
Yeah, and there's always a continuum, I believe, that we change on. It's not even, I've been fortunate enough to sit with shamans and plant medicine and beautiful healers and all those things. And there's very great moments of clarity and levity in those experiences, but the change and the integration of that change is always on a continuum, right? And so like the false belief that we have is that there's going to be a moment that does it all. That moment just sets the stage, right? And then we have to continue on this journey of integration in our life, and that's where we can get derailed when we don't accept that that's the case. So the biggest thing, there were so many lessons, but here I am having sold this company, and believe it or not, within 6 months after I'd sold it, it lost $250 million of value in the stock market. And that was devastating for me because all my stock was locked up in the company. And so I was watching this happen. Everybody who I put into the company, it was just livid with me. And so I'm sicker than I've ever been. I'm in hospital. My wife won't even come to the hospital because this isn't the first time I put myself in the hospital for working too hard. And if that wasn't enough, because it wasn't, I got a phone call that one of my best friends and somebody I traveled the world with, who had 2 young daughters, had died. And he had a heart condition that I actually didn't know he'd had his whole life. It was unexpected, but he'd had the condition his whole life. And so I'm sort of in shock, and I end up going on this business trip to Texas regardless. And I'm sort of this shell of a human being, pitching investors and visiting my stores. And then I come home to the hotel at night, and I hear this story about this 9/11 survivor, widower, who was recounting the time that she'd spoken to her husband when he passed away in the collapse of the World Trade Center. And she's recounting this moment where he calls her from a stairwell and says, "I'm not going to make it. I'm trapped in this building." And they didn't talk about his career success. They didn't talk about his money or their money. They talked about their family. They talked about their life together, these moments that they had. And, then the smoke fills the stairwell and the building goes down. And she says she didn't want to hang up the phone because she knew that the second she hung up the phone, then he would be fully gone to her. And so that 1-2 punch of this story and my friend all of a sudden was like, I need to make a change. And that was the real beginning of the change for me.
Mm. Thank you for this very deep explanation of what I just asked, and we'll go deeper into that question, because I think that's exactly the topic of our conversation. So, I wanted to ask this thing, because you said that there is no one defining moment. There are moments which kind of change something, but they happen again and again, or like life doesn't change on the spot. In business, often we believe that it's about a great idea. Like if I have this cool idea and or like this one breakthrough, like you went on Shark Tank, or this one investment, and then you just said that you went on stock exchange, and then your business started losing actually in value. So how does it work in real life? This is number one, and number two, when can you say that you've made it? And I think I know the answer to that question.
Maybe, I think that the purpose of, again, this is not my quote, and I apologize for not being able to properly cite who deserves the credit, but
Internet
I once read,
credit.
right, that the purpose of life is to be defeated by greater and greater things. And I always look at our life like Joseph Campbell explains the hero's journey, which is, we set out on this adventure. The hero's journey is effectively the underlying theme of every single movie, specifically an action movie, where the metaphor is, there's a villain and we have to fight it. But that villain in our actual journey is inside of us. It's our inner war. It is our fears. It is our insecurities. It's our doubts. It's our mistrust. It's the pains and the traumas that we carry, and then sort of become the triggers, and the way that we show up in the world is through that inner mirror and that inner war that we're fighting. And all the events that we have in our lives, good and bad, present the opportunity, I believe, to do battle inside, to face things inside, to understand how we operate individually inside of us. And to answer the question, if we take those opportunities, if our heart has been broken in a relationship and we fear loving again, we don't want to, we self-sabotage our relationships because we're afraid of having our heart broken again. That's an example of it showing up, okay? If we had a business failure and we were afraid to start again, that's an example of it showing up. And so by just loving again, by just starting another business again, and understanding that, I know that enemy, but I have the courage to face it, we begin to unwind those patterns. And so as our life goes on, we go through these like widening circles of our life. The way that I see it is, it's not that we're there, like we have overcome it, but the obstacles that we face, the inner wars that we face, we're so much quicker to deal with them. We understand them so much more that when they present themselves, whether that's financial loss in a business, the big deal that it once was just becomes a small deal. Maybe it's just an afternoon and a glass of wine and you're over the thing, versus, it being like years of trauma. So that's how I see it happening, is we're much closer to being there, if you will, when we see that the challenges that we inevitably will face our entire life don't drag us down in the same way that they don't impede us in the same way. We've learned from them. We know them. We know how to move around them. Or in one of my favorite examples is like, there's there's this, it's a Buddhist story, and there's a boulder in a field, and the teacher asks his disciples, how hard it would be to move it, or something to that effect. And they all be very hard, etc. And he's like, well, only if you pick it up. Only if you actually pick up the boulder and decide to carry it, is it heavy. And so as we go through our life, we pick up less of those boulders being just something as big as, like for instance, I consult a lot of companies. Some companies are a lot harder to consult for than others, just in terms of how that company operates. Saying no to that contract, saying no to bad relationships, saying no to situations that don't bring us up, that's not picking up the boulder. But early on in our lives, especially in mine, I notice we pick up a lot more of those, and we try and carry them through. If that makes any sense. I'm kind of tangenting here.
I like to ask questions which are sometimes not about the topic, so it's all cool. I never know where the conversation will go. There are some questions, so Bianca, if you can find somebody who is willing to go online, and meanwhile I'll ask. I always ask questions anyway. So do you think why do you think are we picking up more boulders when we are younger and we pick up less? Is it because we like the easier life, or is it wisdom, or is it actually becoming more complacent and not seeing the value in actually exerting yourself like this? Maybe it's
I think that's a really good question, and I think it comes down to our fear and trust. In the beginning, I think we operate with more of this survival instinct that's inherent in our biology, that in order to survive we need to do all these things, and we need to, and as we move through our life, we learn to just trust our life as it unfolds, and know that we don't have to do this thing, because if we don't do this thing, something else will come and fill that. That's much better for us. It's scarcity versus abundance. It's trust versus fear. And also, hopefully we've established maybe some additional financial security, or so I wouldn't use the word complacency necessarily, but I would use the word, or I would just use it, that we've built a foundation that has allowed us to relax into our lives a little bit more. But I know, unfortunately, plenty of people who continue to pick up those boulders no matter, what stage they are. And that's very human. It's just a matter of how quickly you can put it down, to beat the metaphor to death here.
I'm actually a little confused in my head right now, because on one side, I do admire people who have all the energy to pick up new challenges and to do things and to try different stuff. And I remember when I was younger, I would be proud of myself, like doing a lot of things. Now, I feel proud of myself being wise and not exerting myself when I don't have to. So I can't reconcile which approach is better at this current stage. How do you know where you are just being wise and you're not picking up the trouble that you don't need, versus where you are being cautious and don't want to get out of your I wouldn't call it maybe comfort zone per se, but out of you just don't want extra trouble if it's not strictly necessary. How do you know? Yeah.
And we all live that, I think, our whole lives. I'm probably very similar to where you are right now. I always say that the one question we need to always ask ourselves is always why? Why am I doing this thing? Because to flex the muscle, or to work the muscle of challenge and stress, stressing a muscle, to go back to running as an analogy, you don't get better at running by running easy. You get better at running by running hard and then resting. And so the muscle breaks down and then it recovers stronger than it was. And so it's important in our life to understand and take on challenges that serve a purpose, and that we can feel that purpose when we do it. And there's a very big difference between being challenged in our purpose and just being plain challenged in our stress, because we've kind of gone down this road that didn't really fit us. And I think in the beginning, it's really important to do the things you don't like, so that you can know what you don't like, so that you don't have to be like one and done. Say, this is me, this is it, this is what I'm doing. Be open to like where your life will take you and what challenges that will mean, and don't stop embracing the challenges. Just again, take it from the standpoint of, is this challenge keeping my mind sharp and my body sharp and my creativity sharp, and in the vein of my purpose? Not am I just doing it because I have no self-respect and I'm desperate and I'm terrified and I'm operating from all this fear, right? Mm. And so that's maybe how I would differentiate it. That helps the confusion in your mind.
It does. It's really good. Thank you. I think it is really good, because in my niche, in my field of work, sometimes you take on the challenge just because you have to take on the challenge. Or like being in your comfort zone is for the weak, right? But it does make sense. Why put yourself through stress unless it actually moves you towards your purpose, in a sense? So yeah, thanks a lot. So Bianca, dear, do we have, because I see we have quite a few questions here, do we have someone who can come up and join us and ask a question?
Yes, we have the question which got most of the votes, and is from Thales, and we will bring him live.
Nice. So an important aspect of a growth mindset is having a positive attitude towards failures, right? And there is a quote I like that says, fail early, fail often, but always fail forward. Mm-hmm. But most of the times people don't do that. Instead, they keep it blindly repeating the same mistakes over and over again. So, do you have any tips for how to consciously and strategically learn from our mistakes?
Yeah,
that's it.
That's a great question. I think that comes down to being willing to listen, and being open to hearing both yourself and others. And so I'll give you a bit of a story. When I first launched Naked underwear, and I had my first big order, which was from a very, very popular Canadian department store chain, and they ordered 1,000 pairs of underwear from us. And I was like, okay, so that's the initial order. What's the reorders going to be? And the answer was, maybe you'll sell, a few hundred a week, right? So that's best case scenario. So my business partner and I have a conversation, and I say, let's order 20,000 pairs of underwear. And his answer was, let's order 4,000 pairs of underwear. We're very small. So that was a big extension. I said, no, we're going to be huge. I know it. Let's order 20,000 pairs. Because I was the CEO of the company, my vote, I guess, won out, and we did it, much to his disagreement. Well, as it turned out, 2 weeks after launch, I started getting phone calls from people saying, I know why you now call it Naked, because the underwear does not stay on. And what was happening was, because we tried to innovate, and the way that we designed the underwear was it inevitably shot off, like literally just because of the elasticity shot off anybody who didn't wear a size small like I did. So I had a nearly bankrupt company day one, and I had to face my business partner, and I had to accept that I was wrong in that scenario. I did not apply proper process. I did not apply proper to the making of the underwear, to the decision making of how we were going to buy that. And I had to come like way back down to earth. And so if we let other people kind of mirror our faults, and this also comes back to this inner work, as I've confessed at the beginning, I'm operating highly out of insecurity and a determination to prove people wrong. Hence, really bad decision to order 20,000 pairs and think I'm going to be, rich and famous in a week. And when I recognized that that's why I made such a bad decision, because I had, done some of the inner work to realize that, it allows you to take that actually hear that lesson and move forward. And one of the things that I find also everyone is so afraid of, Neil Patel talks about this, is that we all think that like there's this giant spotlight shining on us and that the whole world is going to know of our failure and the whole world is going to, criticize us and think poorly of us, when really nobody gives a crap about us. They're focused on themselves. And so one of the reasons we don't respond well or acknowledge our failures, because we're afraid of that spotlight. We think it's there shining on us. But if we just acted as if there was no spotlight, we'd move forward with the honesty of, we made a mistake and let's learn from it. And when we face it again, hence I get an order from Nordstrom's, am I going to order 20,000 pairs again or whatever? The answer, if I've learned my lesson, is no. Did that help? Is there any more clarity you want me to bring to that? It's a great business quote.
Yeah. But do you, for example, periodically stop to think and reflect on how you can maybe avoid future mistakes?
Yeah. I think that comes down to, just having really good process. And as you make failure or have failures, you bring them into process. You have good board members. You have good advisors. You have good mentors who help you foresee where those failures might show up in your future. Or you, in this case, if this is your second or third business, you can reflect on past failures. In the case of Naked, everything that I was seeing for the first time. I was a fool, right? And not a fool in a bad way, just I didn't know. You don't know what you don't know. So it's hard to reflect on what you don't know. And that's why surrounding yourself with, again, people who are willing to be honest and with you, and also, show you what obstacles you might face. But I still find that no matter what, we end up facing them. We don't get to the land of no failures, even having had many failures. It's just how we respond to them when they happen that I think is the real heart of it.
Thanks.
You're welcome. Thanks for the question.
Thank you so much for asking and for joining us. And so, coming back to failures, I was just listening and wondering, because on one side, you guys were talking about that failures is good. you have to fail to learn, right? But on the other hand, we are trying to avoid failures. I guess I like those contradictions. So where's the balance here?
It is.
And meanwhile, Bianca, if we can have someone else come up, that would be good while we are answering this question.
Failures are expensive. That's why it's like, yes, we need failures to learn. And I found because in most of the companies that I've run or started, there's significant amounts of investor capital in the company. Mm-hmm. So failures mean they understand that there'll be failures, but your entire job is to mitigate them. They're okay with you learning on their dollars, but they don't love it either, right? So yeah, you have to, as Talis said, fail fast, fail forward. Fail often is maybe not.
But don't fail.
That's always like the subtext. It's like, yeah, but don't.
I find like life is so beautiful with all those contradictions. Somehow we have to balance and do both. So we have Hannah here. How do we start a business and be an entrepreneur with a small budget? Good question.
It's a really good question. Good question, Hannah. It is it's the first chapter of my book, and its answer is, it's not just one answer, but there's often this feeling of like, I guess isolation in that feeling, like you're the only one who has a small budget and you're the only one who has trouble getting financing, and how am I going to get this dream off the ground? We all the millions and millions and millions of entrepreneurs in their first businesses have that challenge. And I always say that it's the challenge that asks us, how much do we want this every single day, right? To Talis's point, failure also asks us that question. Do we want to keep going after this thing? And so we live in the glory age of testing an idea, right? And part of the thing that makes being an entrepreneur so beautiful is dreaming huge. Mind Valley, when Vishen started it, versus Mind Valley today is a very different company. From my limited outside perspective and hearing him, chat, and I'm sure you all know that. And that's the same with every company, right? And so it's about holding on to that big, beautiful vision and then pulling it all the way back down to what is called a minimum viable product. And a minimum viable product is, for those who don't know, it's a product that is scalable based on the metrics of product market fit. Product market fit being whether that's a spiritual awakening course or a shoe. Product market fit means you found an audience, a large audience, that's willing to buy your product at the price that you're selling it for. And so it's very timely. If we were talking about, ayahuasca ceremonies 20 years ago, that would be very taboo and still illegal. But the acceptance from a timing perspective is much different today. That's the same with any product. And so to give you what Naked was in the traditional vein, we went department stores and buyers of those department stores would determine whether they thought your product would sell. Now, obviously, you can test that on Kickstarter and everywhere else. And so to kind of give the best example, current example, we started a company called Kosan Travel after Naked, which wanted to make travel clothing. We named Kosan after Kosan Road in Bangkok, Thailand. And we did a lot of research and it determined that a travel dress was the most searched term on Google as it related to travel apparel. And so we had data suggesting that was a good product to make with not much money, by the way, to execute this. So we made one dress. We called it the Go Travel dress. It was great. And we tested that idea on Kickstarter because I'd learned through Naked that you don't determine product market fit through your family and friends. Because most often they're just going to be yes people, right? And even so, even if they're not, they might not be your demo. It might not be, indicative of whether there's a market for you. So we put this product on Kickstarter and we sell $1 million of dresses in 30 days. Took Naked 4 years to get to $1 million in sales, or 3 years. So it really showed us for very, very, very little money that we had product market fit, right? That with minimal investment, we could profitably scale this item. And so whether or not you do $1 million, you can still go after, if your budget is limited, you can still test these ideas, whether that's serving people on Instagram, whether that's serving people on Facebook, whether that's putting it on Kickstarter, Indiegogo. That's the best way to begin any business before you take on capital, before you go too deep into an idea that may not be viable at this moment in time in the way that you're hoping it's viable. So our mantra always is test the idea to prove that there's a probability of success. And if you can prove that, then probability will occur. Theoretically, if you operate the business correctly. And so that's all I'd say is don't think about needing all this money to do these big things until you've proven a small concept that's in the vein. If you put out if I put out 2 courses, if I put out a course for spiritual healing, in 21 days and a business course, and I put both out with the same $20 budget on Google, and I haven't even built the course, right? I haven't built the course. I don't have enough money to build the course. And I get 10 times the click for the business course. Well, I know where I should be putting my money, where I should be putting my time, where I should be putting my effort without having risked the capital ahead of time. So that's like, and the entrepreneur's dilemma in one of them is that we just want to go. Fortunately, I had an accountant for a business partner. So anyway, Hannah, I hope that answers your question.
Well, Hannah is in the audience right now, not in the room. Bianca, we might have time for one more person, but I have to ask that question first. So if there is one more question to bring up, I will be glad to bring up someone else. But I have this question. So in my 17 years in business, and I ended up in business by accident. I wasn't planning. I was born in Soviet Union where business was punishable by law. So that wasn't my dream from childhood. I just ended up in business. But in those 17 years, I've had experiences where I had a business which is now merged into Mind Valley, but it was a separate business in the old days, working in the Russian market, and there was a huge war between our biggest markets, and business was nearly bankrupt, and I lost my business partner. So it was a low moment in my career. I had shambles of business, but then, at some point you have this motivation and you keep going. But in real life, it's not like in books or in movies. In movies, we skip through that long, dark tunnel. And we see that, yes, the person is putting in the effort, and then at the end, the person is the winner. But there was this meme, and I really love this meme about the guy who was digging for diamonds, and one of them turned back, the other one keeps digging. And again, as a meme, it's a beautiful meme. It's cool because you're like, yes, keep digging. But if you're in that tunnel, and it's your business and not some hypothetical diamonds on the meme, it's not as obvious that you have to keep digging, because sometimes you can keep digging all your life and then you'll die realizing that you're a pig-headed idiot. So how do you survive in that long, dark tunnel? How do you understand that you have to keep going versus that you are banging your head on a brick wall and there's nothing behind it? Because that is, I guess, what we were supposed to talk about anyway.
Oh, is that what we're okay? Sorry for taking it on the other tangent.
No, it's my fault. I always like to leave the most interesting thing to the end, so that you have the feeling like, God, I wish we had more time.
That's all good. This comes down to, where are we operating from? Are we operating from our insecurities? Or are we operating, again, in the beginning, it's like, if naked's not working and I'm just dumping money into the thing, that's my ego. But if naked's not working, that could mean a variety of things, right? That could mean my price isn't correct. That could mean I'm not targeting the right people. So taking the time to do the work to understand what is working, and being able to let go of the initial idea that we had, because the initial idea, although might be great, might need to iterate a whole bunch of times before it finds its sweet spot in terms of a product market fit. Instagram's a great example. Instagram's first idea was not what we all post on today, right? Obviously, we all know this story. And so the thing that I didn't do for years, again, being the meme guy, just going after that gold or those diamonds blindly, is ignorance, right? Operating from a standpoint of blind faith is beautiful, and you should have blind faith that it will work out, but you need to let go of exactly how you thought that was going to go, so you can open yourself up to how it is going to go. One of my new companies was, I made travel clothing during COVID-19. Okay, so if I had kept blindly dumping money into Kosan, how silly would that be, right? That would be the equivalent of just digging blindly. Instead, paused the business, did a little bit of PPE, did a little bit of face masks, pivoted, looked for opportunities. And I can't tell you exactly how that story ends, but knock on wood, there's a pretty positive ending in the work, or new beginning in the works here. But that involved me not being, and again, my same business partners naked, helping coax us into this new direction, because we're often operating from a set of beliefs that we've now gone into this world, a set of concepts. We think things have to be a certain way based on what we've learned, the experiences we've had, the teachers we've had, etc. But if you just threw all that out the door for a second and looked at a situation very objectively, then you can pivot, then you can iterate. And I think it's not necessarily where a company begins, it's where a company ends up. And that company ends up there by iterating and being adaptable and being malleable and being open to change and being open to admitting where you weren't right in your initial idea, at least right now. And if that's the case, then even if the goal's still the same, you will find your way there. It just might be a squigglier line. And at the end of the day, knowing when it's time to quit, knowing when none of those ideas work and you need to find something new. You know, can you pivot your business into something else entirely? Do you need to unwind it entirely? Those are the harsh realities that come with being an entrepreneur. And they don't have to be harsh. They don't. They just, you know, in the beginning, they feel like, oh my gosh, this was my idea. How could I ever not do it exactly how I thought about it? And then over time, it's like, that's okay. There's a lot of ways to achieve this same outcome. And it starts to flow better like that. I won't share that.
Why not?
Well, I don't want to be, I can, if you want. I was cognizant of time. I know you mentioned that.
Yes, I wanted to bring up someone else, if possible. Bianca,
yeah,
what's
sure.
Sure, we have Mosidi, which has a very good question. Mosidi,
Awesome.
I'm bringing you live as a panelist.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I'm calling from South Africa. Thank you. I didn't even think I'd get in.
I thought you were calling from Spain, so I'm glad that we've clarified that.
I don't know why my background is like this. I think you answered partly my question. I had a business, in a service-based business, and I have it was on and off. I left corporate after 25 years, and I can you hear me?
Yep. Yeah.
And I started my marketing and brand agency business. I was meandering. I didn't really know what I was doing, but I've been a marketer and a strategist for a long time. And it was up and down, but it was chugging along. And then last year, October, suddenly it fell to pieces. And then October, November, December, January, February, March, it's almost April. I haven't had any revenues. And it's been such a painful journey.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, when is the time to go? Actually, it's not working because I've put so much money into the business and it's just not worked out. And I'm like, it's painful, but I'm feeling stuck and I am fearful in the same vein. I'm a single mom and I'm so scared to do something stupid in case it jeopardizes my daughter's future. So I'm like, I know I'm in fear mode and I'm in stuck mode and I'm just not sure how to move forward. And I don't know what's blocking me to move forward and to go out. And I know it's fear, but how do I get out of it?
Maybe you and I can talk for an hour offline on the house. If Bianca or someone wants to connect us, I'd be happy to, because this is not a question I can necessarily answer in our time, but you know, there's to start with a positive, there's this story I kind of always refer to where there's this fisherman and he's walking down the beach and it's before sunrise, and so it's early and his boat isn't ready to go, and so he's walking down the beach and he finds this bag which he thinks is full of rocks, and he starts, you know, just to kill time, tossing the rocks from the bag into the ocean one by one. And as sun rises, he realizes that it wasn't a bag of rocks, it was a bag of precious gems. And he had 3 left. And so he has 2 ways to look at this situation: that he wasted a whole bag of diamonds or precious gems, or that he has 3 left. And that's the way I look at any of these situations, is that we always have, if we need to, a chance to start again. And we don't have to be afraid of starting again, because, you know, you're held and protected in your journey, and you can't make a stupid choice. Don't say that about yourself. We're in the midst of a global pandemic, maybe on the tail end of it, sure. And so if I'm assessing your business from a practical standpoint, much like Kosan, you know, is it just the fact that the macro trends are very challenging right now? Or, you know, so that's a question that only you can answer as it relates to the city or the place you are in South Africa, and where you're trying to cast your net, and who your strategy as it relates to that. And so definitely, you know, dive into why that might be. It sounds like you're taking that on like it has something to do with you, and I doubt that very much it has something to do with you. You sound like a very talented and dedicated person who's in line with a beautiful objective of wanting to provide something for their daughter. So don't make this about yourself. You're not stupid. Just look at the situation practically, and then begin to try and answer the questions of, one, okay, if these are the challenges I'm facing, can I turn those around? Or two, I can't turn those around. It's time to cut this off and invest my time energy somewhere else, because it will expand ultimately, you know. But again, you know, I can't answer that. I'm happy to do a deep dive, like I said, just as a thank you for this opportunity. So please connect to me separately if that's something you guys do. I'd love to learn more about your challenge and opportunity that you're facing here.
Thank you so much. Of course, Bianca, if you could put them together, it would be really nice, Joel. And sorry, I have to check. Mosidi. Yes, Mosidi. Thank you so much. Unfortunately, we don't have any time left, so I thank you for coming on and for asking the question, which is such an important question, and actually something that a lot of us can relate to. A lot of us who have been in business, we get this kind of doubts, maybe not exactly in this circumstances, but the doubts, like, should I go on, or should I change direction? So thank you so much. And traditionally, if you can do it quickly, traditionally I like to ask, if our guest would forget everything, what would be the most important thing you would want them to leave this conversation with? Or maybe you can give us a homework.
Yeah, I mean, a good piece of homework is ask yourself, if we look at the two sides of the conversation, from a personal side, you know, what are the boulders you're picking up in your life? What are the things that you're carrying that you don't need to? And if you put them down, you'd feel a lot lighter. You'd be in the flow. You'd move a lot faster. You know, so what are some of those? And if you don't know, ask somebody you trust to tell you, because they probably know. And to have that honest conversation. And on the entrepreneurship side, it seems like, you know, the theme is really removing ourselves from the challenges of our business, and in the standpoint of saying, and looking at these objectives, looking at the business very objectively. You know, does this product have product market fit? What are the reasons my business is failing? Because, you know, not taking that on personally, or trying to put your personal biases into that. So the exercise of just looking at your business, your brand, the thing you want to start from a very objective standpoint as an exercise, and seeing where, you know, the challenges are when you take yourself out of it.
I really love the idea of taking yourself out of the equation, especially for those people who are their business, essentially.
Yeah. I always say it's hard if you're in the business of trying to sell a business, it's hard to sell a business if you're the business. So you have to, you know, harder, it's not impossible, you know, over time you can build enough brand equity. But so I like to think of it as, how can I build this business as if it could operate without me and my bias, you know, and all that. So.
Thank you, Joel, so much. Thank you, everyone who has been with us, especially the guys who came on with the cameras or without the cameras. It's always a pleasure to have you guys also join the conversation. It reminds that we are actually a big community. Thank you for all your comments. Traditionally, I want to ask you guys all to leave a heart for my guest, Joel. You can leave it in the chat, or if you're watching it later on one of our platforms, leave it in the comments. And yes, thank you, Joel, for finding the time and especially for offering your help to Mosidi. So it's really, really touching that you did that. Thank you.
No, of course. This is honestly, it's surreal because, like I said, I've been following you guys for years. So thank you for having me.
Thank you all. And Bianca, you can draw the curtain. We are done. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.